Have you ever wondered why you feel invisible even when you're surrounded by people? There's a kind of silence you carry, the kind that doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion, from always having to hold it together, from smiling when you want to scream, from explaining yourself to people who never really wanted to understand, from shrinking so others could feel big, from hiding so no one would leave. You didn't choose this version of you. It wasn't born out of joy. It was built brick by brick from the things that hurt you. The way you freeze when someone raises their voice, the way you apologize for existing too loudly. That's not who you are. That's what you became to survive. And somewhere along the way, the wound stopped bleeding, but it started shaping you. In this video, we're not going to talk about healing like it's a checklist. We won't use big words that make your pain feel like a puzzle to solve. This isn't a lecture. This is a mirror, a quiet place where maybe, just maybe, you'll feel seen. Not for the mask, but for what's underneath. We'll walk together through the moments that changed you. We'll name the silence, the pressure, the guilt, the fear of being too much and not enough all at once. And we'll say the things you never had the chance to say out loud. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't even need to believe you're ready. All you need is to breathe and stay. If this finds you in a moment where your chest feels tight and your eyes sting without reason, I just want you to know, you're not broken. You were shaped, and you can reshape. Take your time here. Let this video be a space where nothing has to be performed. No masks, no pretending. Just you and the truth you've been carrying for years. And if something inside you feels like it's being named for the first time, stay with us. Subscribe if you'd like more spaces like this. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Or just breathe. That's enough too. Now, let's begin. You learned early that love wasn't safe. Not the kind of love that was supposed to protect you. Not the kind that held your hand when you were scared or reminded you that you were allowed to exist just as you were. Instead, you were taught to earn your place. To behave. To be useful. To not upset anyone. And if you did everything right, maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't leave. So you adapted. You became what they needed. You made yourself quiet when they were angry. You smiled when they were disappointed. You learned to read a room before you learned to read a book. You picked up on tone, on tension, on danger faster than you ever picked up on praise. This wasn't personality. It was armor. And over time, that armor started to feel like skin. You forgot what it felt like to move without checking if it was too much. You forgot what your voice sounded like when it wasn't trying to sound small. You forgot how to feel joy without scanning for consequences. Somewhere in the quiet, you stopped asking for what you needed. Not because you didn't have needs, but because you were so used to not being met. Even now, you might hesitate to call this pain. Maybe you say it's just how I am. Maybe you brush it off as being independent, low maintenance, easygoing. But beneath all of that, you're tired. Tired of feeling like connection is a test you never studied for. Tired of questioning if someone likes you, or if they just like the version of you that makes their life easier. Tired of never being the one who's allowed to fall apart. And deep down, you wonder if anyone's ever truly seen you. Not the helpful you, not the strong you, not the version that bends and folds and rearranges, but the one beneath all that, the one who once hoped someone would stay long enough to understand. That hope, it's still there, quiet, but alive. Because no matter how many years go by, there's always a part of you that remembers who you were before the performance. The part that didn't think love had to hurt. That didn't believe closeness was dangerous. That didn't feel ashamed for needing care. And maybe you've buried that part so deep you forgot it even exists. But I promise it's not gone. It's just waiting for you to stop running from it. You weren't born careful. You became that way. You became careful with your words. Because someone once made you pay for saying the wrong thing. You became careful with your presence because you learned how easily people disappear. You became careful with your joy because showing too much of it meant someone could take it away. Careful turned into quiet. Quiet turned into invisible. And invisible became safe. But safety built on self-erasure is not safety. It's survival. And survival isn't living. It's hiding. You don't wake up one day and decide to lose yourself. It happens slowly, in moments, in trade-offs. You trade honesty for harmony. You trade your no for their comfort. You trade rest for being needed. You trade your truth for their love. And it works. At first, people love the version of you that makes their life easier. They praise your patience, your understanding, your strength. But no one ever asks what it costs you, because the world rarely questions the performance as long as it's beautiful. But you do. At 2 a.m. when your body feels heavy and your chest is tight and you can't figure out why, you question it. When someone compliments you and it feels like they're talking about someone else, you question it. When you're surrounded by people but still feel like you're floating outside your own skin, you question it. And the question is this: if they love me for the mask, does anyone really love me at all? It's not just loneliness. It's the grief of being misunderstood for so long that you started misunderstanding yourself. You might not even know what you want anymore. Not because you're lost, but because you've spent so long being what everyone else needed. You never got to be who you are. But here's something I need you to hear. Who you are is not gone. She's waiting. He's watching. They're listening. That inner voice you silenced for safety, it still knows the way. You don't have to burn everything down. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to shatter the mask in one breath. But maybe, just maybe, you can start by not apologizing for wanting more. It starts quietly, not with a breakthrough but with a pause. Not with fireworks, but with a whisper. The moment you catch yourself saying, "I'm fine," and something inside you finally answers, "No, I'm not." That's not weakness, that's the return of your truth. It's the moment you stop gaslighting yourself. The moment you stop turning every red flag into a story where it was your fault. The moment you realize being understanding shouldn't mean being unprotected. You were conditioned to stay in places that hurt, to see the best in people, even when they gave you the worst, to call it love, even when it drained you, and when it fell apart, you didn't rage. You blamed yourself. Maybe you weren't kind enough. Maybe you were too emotional, too much, too intense, too sensitive, too real. But that voice, the one that always puts you on trial, it isn't you. It's an echo of every time you had to over-explain your pain just to be taken seriously. An echo of the people who made you feel like you had to shrink to be loved. An echo of survival, dressed up as logic. But here's what no one told you. You don't owe anyone the most palatable version of yourself. You don't have to stay in relationships that only accept your silence. You don't have to keep proving that your softness deserves protection. Your wound was never weakness. It was the place you were forced to grow a shell, not because you were fragile, but because the world refused to hold you gently. And now, you have the choice they never gave you. You can choose to stop calling self-abandonment maturity. You can choose to stop calling over-functioning resilience. You can choose to stop performing healing and actually feel it, even if it's messy, even if it's slow, even if it means losing people who only knew how to love your mask, because you deserve something real. And the most real thing you'll ever do is come home to the parts of you that learned to survive and finally tell them, you're safe now. There's a version of you, untouched by performance. She never learned to apologize for needing warmth. He never felt ashamed for crying when it hurt. They never had to calculate their worth by how easy they were to love. This version of you isn't perfect, but they're honest, and they're still inside you, beneath all the strategies you built just to feel safe. You didn't fail for becoming who you had to be. You adapted, you survived. And survival asks for silence. It asks you to smile when your heart is breaking, to stay when your body begs you to leave, to say yes when your whole soul is screaming no. It teaches you to wear peace like a costume, just so the war inside doesn't spill into the room. But the war is still there, and you're still bleeding, even if no one sees it. And you're so good at hiding it that even you forget, until one day it shows up in your relationships. You keep choosing people who need fixing because it feels familiar. You give more than you have because you don't know how not to. You run from love that sees you clearly because it feels dangerous to be that known. And then you ask, why does this keep happening to me? But maybe the better question is, what part of me still believes I have to suffer to be loved? It's not self-pity, it's self-awareness. The moment you realize that your patterns aren't punishments, they're echoes. Echoes of a childhood where you had to grow up too fast. Echoes of a love that hurt more than it healed. Echoes of a silence that taught you to disappear instead of demand. But echoes can fade. If you stop repeating them, that's the work no one sees. Not the highlight reel, not the inspirational quote. but the late nights where you feel the urge to reach out to someone toxic and don't. The mornings where you choose rest instead of proving your worth through exhaustion. It's unglamorous, unnoticed, but it's sacred, because each quiet rebellion is a step back to yourself. You're not broken. You're just learning how to belong to yourself again. You used to call it love. The way your heart clung to someone who only showed up halfway. The way you waited for texts that came late and cold. The way you gave chances not because they deserved them, but because you couldn't bear the silence that would come after goodbye. But that wasn't love. That was fear, dressed up in hope. You weren't loving. You were proving you were worth staying for, proving you weren't too much, proving that if someone finally chose you, maybe you weren't the problem after all. And every time they pulled away, you stayed longer, because leaving felt like failure, because staying felt like purpose. That's what happens when the wound becomes the compass. You start chasing what looks familiar, not because it's good for you, but because chaos feels like home. You think, if I can just fix this, if I can just make them love me, then maybe I can finally silence the voice that says I wasn't lovable to begin with. But you're not here to convince someone to see you. You're here to remember that you were never meant to be invisible. It's not your job to make someone less afraid of intimacy. It's not your role to hold their chaos just so you feel needed. And it's not your fault they couldn't meet you where you are. They weren't your mirror. They were your echo, reflecting every unhealed part of you that still thought love was about sacrifice. But real love? It doesn't feel like a performance. It doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't reward your silence with breadcrumbs of affection. Real love sees your fullness and stays, even when you're not easy, even when you're not perfect, even when you're not performing. And before you can have that with someone else, you have to stop betraying yourself just to feel chosen. You have to stop calling pain fate. You have to stop calling patterns love. You have to look at the wound and say, you don't get to drive anymore, because you're not a reflection of who hurt you. You're the beginning of who heals you. Healing doesn't always look like light. Sometimes it looks like rage, the kind you've buried under politeness for years, the kind that surfaces when you finally realize how much you gave, how little you received, and how long you pretended that was okay. It looks like grief too, grieving the time you lost, the people you trusted, the version of you that believed love meant endurance. And it's tempting to run from that, to rush into positivity, to slap a quote over a scar and call it closure. But there's no shortcut through what was never felt. You have to sit with it. The ache, the loneliness, the shame, the memory of standing in a room full of people and still feeling like a stranger. You don't have to fix it. You just have to stop abandoning yourself in it. Because every time you silence that small voice inside, the one that says this doesn't feel right, you teach it that truth isn't safe. And every time you call your intuition overreacting, you bury the very compass that's trying to bring you home. But you're starting to listen again. You're noticing who drains you, who confuses you, who only shows up when you're quiet, agreeable, useful. You're noticing the cost of being the strong one, how it isolates you, how it makes everyone believe you're fine even when you're falling apart. You're noticing how tired you are, not just physically, but soul deep. Because carrying a personality built on pain is exhausting. Smiling through betrayal is exhausting. Explaining your heart in a language no one speaks is exhausting. But here you are, still choosing yourself, even when it's awkward, even when it's lonely, even when your hands shake as you say, I can't do this anymore. That's not weakness, that's power. Not the kind that looks good on paper. The kind that gets built, brick by painful brick, in the quiet hours when no one's clapping. The kind that says, I'm done living a life that requires me to disappear in order to belong. There's something sacred about the moment you stop begging to be understood. You stop trying to twist your pain into something poetic. You stop explaining your boundaries like they're courtroom defenses. You stop waiting for someone to validate the wound before you believe it exists. It's not that you don't want connection. You do, desperately, but not at the price of self-erasure anymore. You've spent years translating yourself into something softer, quieter, more acceptable, just to be met with confusion or distance. So now, you're choosing honesty over harmony, clarity over comfort, peace over performance. That choice will cost you things. Some people will call you cold. They'll say you changed. They'll say you're different now. And you are. Because healing isn't just about feeling better. It's about becoming unfamiliar to the people who were only comfortable with your pain. They loved the version of you that smiled through discomfort, that apologized for having needs, that made their life easier by making yours smaller. But now you speak. Now you say no. Now you walk away when your body says enough. And that's terrifying, because it's new. Because you were taught that love means staying, that compassion means overextending, that kindness means silence. But you're unlearning all of that now. You're learning that you can be kind and still say, "This doesn't work for me." You're learning that you can be soft and still walk away. You're learning that love, real love, doesn't feel like begging. It feels like ease, like safety, like home, not survival. And home doesn't demand you split yourself in half to make someone else feel whole. You were never too much. They were just too limited. You were never broken. You were just bending in ways no one should have to. And now you're unfolding. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you finally realized you don't need to earn the right to be whole. You've always known it, haven't you? That quiet ash. That sense that something inside you was waiting. Not for a person, not for a perfect moment, but for you. For the day you'd stop running from your own reflection. For the day you'd stop measuring your worth by how much pain you can tolerate. For the day you'd realize the life you want doesn't begin with them. It begins when you stop abandoning yourself. It's not loud, this realization. It comes softly. In the mornings you wake up and no longer feel the urge to prove anything. In the moments you speak and don't flinch, even if your voice trembles. In the times you choose yourself not out of rebellion, but because you finally believe you deserve to. You were shaped by wounds, but you are not your wound. You are what came after. The resilience, the tenderness, the clarity that no one can offer what you're unwilling to give yourself. That doesn't mean you never need anyone. It means you no longer confuse being needed with being loved. You no longer confuse chaos with passion. You no longer wait for people to become who they promised they were. You no longer stay just because leaving feels like failure. You understand now. You are not here to fix broken things just to feel whole. You are not here to rescue people who drown you with their weight. You are not here to keep proving your value to those who never knew how to hold it. You are here to return, to reclaim the pieces of yourself you left in rooms that never felt safe. To speak the truth, not just the soft parts, but the sharp ones too. To love yourself in ways that rewrite the script entirely. Because your life is not a wound to be carried. It's a story to be rewritten. And every time you choose stillness over scrambling, truth over pretending, boundaries over burnout, you're writing a new ending. One where you are not the echo. You are the voice. Not what happened to you, but what you chose to become despite it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real you. The one who doesn't just survive the wound, but transforms it into power. There will be days when the wound tries to return. When someone says something that sounds like the past. When a door closes and it feels like abandonment all over again. When silence stretches long enough that your chest tightens and your old instincts whisper, "You messed it up again." On those days, you'll feel the pull. To over-explain. To over-apologize. To overfunction. To crawl back into the version of you that made everyone else comfortable. But pause. Breathe. You're not that person anymore. You're not who you were when the wound was fresh and survival felt like obedience. You're allowed to stay with yourself now, even when it's hard. Because here's the truth. Healing doesn't erase the wound. It teaches you how to live beside it, without letting it make your decisions. It reminds you that you can feel the old fear, and still choose differently. You can feel anxious, and still set the boundary. You can feel unsure, and still walk away. You can miss them, and still know they weren't good for you. That is power. The quiet, relentless power of someone who chose themselves one small moment at a time. Not because it was easy, not because they never looked back, but because they were finally tired of bleeding for love that never bled back. This version of you, the one who hesitates, but doesn't collapse. The one who shakes but speaks anyway. The one who feels lost sometimes but no longer abandons herself in the dark. She is not a product of trauma. She is a product of truth. Your truth. And your truth is this. You are worthy, not when you're useful, not when you're agreeable, not when you're easy to love. You are worthy because you exist, because you are trying, because you are rebuilding a life that feels like yours, not one you were pressured into performing. So even when it's hard, even when the ache returns, even when the voice in your head says you haven't healed enough, you stay, you breathe, you remind yourself, I am no longer living through my wound. I am living through my choice. You'll know you've changed, not by how loud you become, but by how quiet you stay when chaos knocks and you no longer open the door. You'll see it in the way you pause before answering, in the way you let people misunderstand you without racing to correct them, in the way you let silence speak for you when words would only be a performance. That's not detachment, that's self-respect. You're not cold, you're clear, and clarity comes after years of confusion, after loving people who taught you to doubt your own instincts, after explaining your pain in a language they never intended to understand. But now you speak less and feel more. Now you don't chase closure, you choose peace. Now you don't need their apology because you've already given yourself permission to stop bleeding for a future that was never going to arrive. This is what reclaiming your life looks like. Not a grand moment, but 1,000 quiet refusals. Refusing to abandon yourself again. Refusing to make space for people who treat your love like a convenience. Refusing to keep giving the benefit of the doubt when what you really need is the benefit of the boundary. You're not who you were, and yes, you still carry the wound. But now it's a map, not a cage. It shows you where you bent too far, where you spoke too softly, where you loved too hard just to feel real. And in those places, you now plant something different. Not more performance, not more perfection, but presence. You meet yourself where you are raw, cracked, still healing, and you stay because you finally understand. The wound became your personality once, but it doesn't get to define your future. Your future belongs to the version of you who walks without pretending, who loves without losing herself, who lives without waiting to be chosen because she already chose herself. And that changes everything. So here you are, not fixed, not finished, but finally, honest. There's no trophy for what you've done, no parade for how many nights you held yourself together in silence, no applause for the mornings you woke up and chose not to disappear again. But that doesn't make it any less powerful. Because real healing doesn't look impressive to the world. It looks like eating when you're not hungry, because you know you matter. It looks like turning off your phone, because someone's silence no longer owns your self-worth. It looks like laughing not to be liked, but because something actually made your heart feel light for a second. That's how it begins. 1 second of light, 1 moment of real, 1 decision to be you, even when no one claps for it. You don't have to rewrite your whole life. You just have to stop leaving yourself behind in the middle of it. No more chasing love that feels like punishment. No more calling fear loyalty. No more confusing self-sacrifice with strength. You get to be soft without being stepped on. You get to need without shame. You get to rest without guilt. You get to say, I'm not who I was when I let that happen to me. And mean it. Because now, your wound isn't a weight, it's a doorway. A passage back to the parts of you that never needed to be erased, just witnessed. Held, believed, and as you walk forward, there's no need to perform wholeness. You are already whole, not because the pain is gone, but because you've stopped running from it. You faced it, Saturday with it, listened to what it taught you, and then gently you stood up and chose something else. You chose you, and that choice, over and over and over again, is how you take your life back. Thank you for being here. If something in this journey touched you, share it. Not for me, but for the next person who still believes they are their wound. They're not. And now maybe they'll remember. Subscribe if you'd like more moments like this. Or simply breathe. You've already done the hardest part.